For those of you who don't know Kelly, I mean, I feel like Kelly is like pretty much famous now in this space, though, right? Are you famous yet?
I don't know. I did go to a conference and somebody was like, "Oh my gosh, it's you!" And I was like, "Oh, okay." That was a weird moment. Like, yeah,
You're like, it's me. Who's me?
I don't know who's me. Yeah,
Yeah, good times, good times. That's cool. That's cool being recognized for your work.
yeah. It's nice. Yeah,
Yeah, so Kelly McLaughlin is the founder and CEO of From Scratch Fundraising, and she's been a professional fundraiser since 2009. A
yeah,
lot of experience, a
yeah.
lot of experience. I know she has
Yes.
worked closely with Rob, our CEO and co-founder, for a while. Tight there.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Part of the friends and family. And
Yes.
yeah, she's also the creator of the framework for fundraising sustainability. And more importantly, she's really helped an individual giving program move from 300,000 to 1 million in annual revenue. That's not just all honeymoons. It's like
Yes.
the hard numbers too. So I am just always so pleased to welcome you to our summits, and please show some love for Kelly in the chat as
Yeah.
he takes it away.
Jenna, it looks like I can't respond to people in the chat. I can do you or hosts and panelists. Is there a way I can reply to everybody?
Hmm.
Hmm,
If
that's
you
weird.
choose the drop down, does it even give you the option?
Nope, it's just hosts and panelists and you. That's
Hmm.
interesting. Well, I'll just answer people in the chat verbally.
Just
Because
sure. I don't
Serena
know.
said
Like
she loves the name of my business, and I wanted to say thank you.
our
So thank
technology
you.
has been a little like all over the place today, but we're just rolling
Hmm.
with it. I'm so sorry that
Hey,
that's not available for
as
you
you
right
do.
now,
No
but
worries. No worries.
let me know if you want me to
All
share
right,
something
everybody.
else.
I will not be chatting with you. I will. I will just be replying to you. But if you have come to a presentation with me before, you know that I love it when you are active in the chat. So please put your reactions, your questions in the chat. I don't like talking into the void. I like interacting with you all. So anyway, I'm going to be talking today about productivity hacks for fundraising. So this is a little out of my norm, so you get to see something a little special. I have a group coaching and learning program. It's called Sustain and Thrive. And this productivity hacks is like a special thing that I do for them. So for my friends at CauseVox, I decided to pull it out of my group coaching program and show it to all of you. But it's usually behind the paywall of my group coaching program. So let's see. Hold on. Let me get that up. Pull the chat back up. All right. So everybody, yes, don't be shy in the chat. If there's anything you want to ask, please do. But we are going to talk about productivity hacks for fundraising, tools, tricks, everything. My operations manager, Amy, was supposed to be here to give you even more good stuff, but she is sick today, which I'm really bummed about. Hopefully you can, if you're interested in joining our group coaching program, you can meet Amy at some point. She's phenomenal. But anyway, I will do my best to fill in for her in her absence. But anyway, so things that I want you to learn today. I want you to understand how to take goals and priorities and use them to make you more effective in your fundraising and in your organization overall. How to break down and track tasks. This is so critical. Um, and then some other productivity tools that you can use. A couple of my other just like quick tips. And then I want to share with you kind of the daily reflection that I do at the end of the day so that I can kind of course correct a little bit every single day, right? I don't want to get halfway across the ocean and realize I'm aiming towards the wrong continent. I want to do little adjustments as I go. So I want to talk about goals and priorities because I think this is something we really struggle with nonprofits. I was meeting yesterday with a client of mine, and he has such amazing goals for his organization. And I love the heck out of his mission. And, but the problem is his goal is to big. His goal is too big, and not in the I want him to aim lower, but it's so big, it's hard to understand where to start on chipping away at the goal. And so we have this big goal, and then because we can't incrementally break it down, it's hard to tell in any given moment what our top priority is. So one of the things I did with him yesterday is we took his big goal and we broke it down and we broke it down and we broke it down, and we went from this big epic goal, support new entrepreneurs in our community, down to the very detailed task of contact this person about doing a workshop on this topic, right? So we went from his big dream of supporting new entrepreneurs to very specific tasks, and we had a roadmap of how he was going to get there, right? And I know we talk about strategic planning. This isn't strategic planning, right? This is literally taking the big goal that you're working towards and figuring out what are the things that are going to happen today, tomorrow, the next day that are going to work us towards those goals, right? And when I used to raise $1 million, like, how do you raise $1 million? $1 at a time, right? So that's something that we have to think about. We have to think about what is the next task, because the big goals can actually feel really overwhelming and hold us in place sometimes. So let's talk about that. When we don't have goals, right, and no goals at all, we do what makes the most sense next. But that can sometimes either stop us from moving forward. Like I said, this client that I was working with, it became really urgent that we sit down and break his goal into steps, because he's had this dream for a long time and was getting nowhere, right? And so that goal was as good as no goal, right? And then so it was hard for him to move forward. But the other thing that happens when we don't have goals at all is we just do the next best thing, right? And I think this is something I see with a lot of nonprofits, right? We really desperately want to help our community, and so we do the next thing that feels like it's going to help. But sometimes I've seen people start a nonprofit and 5 years later they look back and they're like, I'm no closer to achieving my goals than when I started, but I set really good goals. So what happened? The problem is we didn't figure out how to break down the goal, right? So the first thing I like to talk to my clients about when they're setting goals in the first place is to do what I call a SWOT. You've probably heard this called a SWOT, SWOT. I say SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. So if you are at a point where you don't even know what your goals are, this is a good place to start. Looking back, what are your strengths and how can you capitalize on them? What are your weaknesses and what can you do to mitigate the consequences of those weaknesses? I'm definitely somebody who likes to rely on my strengths, and I like to pretend I don't have any weaknesses. But really, I think when we lean into our strengths rather than try to work around our weaknesses, we come out a lot more powerful on top, right? So what are our strengths? How do we capitalize on them? And how do we take our weaknesses and minimize their impact, right? So that's looking back. And then looking forward, what are the opportunities that we see for ourselves and our organization? And what are the challenges that we see? So usually this is a SWOT, and it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But I think sometimes when we think threats, we think of things that like would shut down our organization. And I want you to think about it slightly differently. I want you to think about it in terms of challenges, which are things you can overcome a challenge. But threats are a little threatening, right? So what you want to do is look back, look forward. What are your strengths and weaknesses historically? What are your opportunities and challenges moving forward? And what goals does that suggest for you and for your organization or for your fundraising program? Does everybody think this is helpful? This walk. It's kind of a tried and true thing in strategic planning. Almost anybody who's going to walk you through a strategic planning process is going to bring up a SWOT or a SWOT. And it's because it is a useful exercise, but too often we don't really sit down and do that kind of looking because we're so frantic to do the next thing. But sometimes that pause is the most critical thing you can do next. And then one of the things that I like to do is then take a big goal and I like to break it down. So from the big goal, what is the goal for each quarter of the year, right? If my goal is a big annual goal, I'm going to raise $1 million this year. How am I going to break that up into quarterly goals? And then how am I going to take my quarterly goals and break them down into a monthly goal? And then I believe in even a weekly goal, right? So one of the things we do with our clients in our Sustain and Thrive group program is we have them set monthly goals in one of our coaching calls every month. And then we ask them to break that down into what they're going to need to do practically every single week to achieve that goal by the end of the month. And so we call that their weekly one. So that is the one thing they need to do this week to move their goal ahead. This is something we encourage our clients to do because it is something I do with our business. Is I have a weekly one, and it is the one thing that I cannot not do that week, right? And then this might be something you've heard of before, but it's called a daily 3. So if you set your weekly 1, you want to have daily 3, which are either the things that are going to contribute to that weekly 1 or the 3 most important things for that day. And sometimes it's really, really hard for us to determine what that daily 3 is, what that weekly 1 is, if we don't have that bigger goal in mind. So that's what we do with a lot of our clients is we take the big goal and then we chop it down into quarterly goals and then monthly goals and then weekly ones and then daily 3s. So this is a great way to take something that's big. You can take this as a gala, a fundraising campaign, anything like that. How do you can set the goal, break it down, break it down, break it down. And the thing that's going to help you break down those goals is by thinking about how are you going to break it into pieces, right? So when I was working with this client yesterday, we took his big goal. And then the first thing we did was we looked at what are the projects that will get the goal done. And so what we determined was he was going to need to come up with the series of workshops that he was going to do to support entrepreneurs. That was one project. And then partnering with the local Chamber of Commerce to do a mentorship program. That was another project that he wanted to put on the docket. And then providing a space for people to come and work if they didn't have dedicated office space in their own homes. Okay, that's another project, is acquisitioning that space and setting it up for office work, right? That took this big goal that was feeling really insurmountable for this client and broke it down into projects. Once you break your goal down into projects, then it's much easier to figure out what are the tasks that get that done, right? And then once you have those tasks, sometimes I like to break things even into subtasks, right? I use Asana as a project management tool, and no joke, you guys, if you go into my Asana, if I'm gonna get in touch with Jenna about teaching a workshop, I have, CauseVox, Jenna, workshop, that's the task, but then it'll be contact, come up with idea for Jenna, email Jenna the idea, follow up with Jenna if I haven't heard from Jenna, right? I break it down into all of those little tasks because for me, those are the stumbling blocks, right? If I don't really think through every little thing that I need to do, sometimes I get lost in my own brain or get lost. Those little things. I might email Jenna about my workshop project, but if she's on vacation and misses my emails, then maybe I'm never going to follow up with her and I completely forget. And it's months later that I go, wait, what happened with that thing that I wanted to do with Jenna? Right? So sometimes even having a send this email, follow up on this email task can be really, really helpful in breaking things from those big picture goals down to the things that are gonna help every single day. Yes? Yes, Alan, I I love that you call out this is good for neurodivergent people. I am neurodivergent myself, so I can only function this way, but I find it really, really helpful. A lot of the tools that work for people who are neurodivergent are actually really supportive to people who are neurotypical as well. So yes, it's so, so good. So that's a great way to take goals. If you have a goal and you just feel like you're not making progress, taking that big goal, break it into what projects are going to make the goal happen, what are the tasks that are going to make that project get done, and then what are even the subtasks, the nitty gritty, the little bitty things that you might forget along the way. Can you make those subtasks part of this? Adam asks, what do you use to organize, sort, and maintain these goal steps? Yes. Asana is my favorite tool, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. I'm going to share a ton of tools with you. But in terms of breaking down goals, I love Asana. I pay for the paid subscription because I love it, but they do have a free version that honestly, I've never had a client pay for Asana because the free version of Asana does everything they want it to do. I just like the premium version because there are like 2 or 3 things that I like that I pay for. But really, you can use Asana. I used Asana for 7 years in a nonprofit, never paid a dime for it. So the free version will get you very, very far. So I love Asana for this. So usually what I do is I sit down, I break this down. I'm a big believer in the big giant Post-its. If you were in my office, you would see I have about 10 of those like giant wall Post-its. So yeah, so I put those giant wall Post-its out. I break down the goal. I do all of that, and then I take all of it and I dump it into Asana. Yes, Asana. Yes. So that is my favorite tool to use. All right, and so some of the ways I approach this, because I know sometimes you can say, okay, it's all well and good to think about a goal, but how do I even start to break down and process my goals? Hold on just a second. Something happened on my computer. Okay, so one of the ways I like to break down work is to think about work streams. And then each work stream is going to have goals. Those are going to lend themselves to projects, tasks, subtasks. And then I use time boxing or time blocking to manage all of those tasks. So let's talk about that. So breaking down your work. Sometimes it's hard to set those big picture goals outside of a strategic planning setting. But I often find a lot of organizations, you don't have the time to really sit down and do that really big strategic planning thing. And so I find it helpful to set annual goals. Like I said, annual goals, quarterly goals. A lot of our clients in Sustain and Thrive, they don't have those big picture goals. They haven't done strategic planning. We're just coaching them through those monthly goals. And I find that's absolutely fine, right? It's going to get you places, even if you can kind of, what's the next best goal? But one of the things I like to do when I'm working with nonprofit leaders who are wearing a ton of hats, right? I think those solo executive directors who are, you know, the director of development and the director of programming and the chief finance officer, right? I'm assuming that it describes a lot of you in this room, right? How many of you are like a staff of one at your organization, or, you know, less than 5 staff? Raise your hand if you've got less than 5 staff in your organization. So I like to coach my clients through thinking about their work streams. So this helps me a lot. Is I have to think about all of my work in different buckets. So what is my administrative work? What is my fundraising work? What is my program work? So what I did with my client that I met with yesterday is this is what we did. He's a solo executive director. And so what we did is we did programs. Let's list each of your programs. Now let's think about admin. What's all the admin stuff you've got going on? What about your board of directors? What about marketing? What about fundraising? These were all the different work streams that he has to be thinking about. And so even though sometimes our overarching goals kind of go across these work streams, sometimes what I find is if you can break it down into what your different work streams are and create goals for those work streams, that's the most effective way of goal setting for kind of short-term goals, just to move you forward. So then for every work stream, you've got your goals, or every program, you've got a goal. And then you have your different projects underneath each of those work streams. And if you're using Asana, what I do is at this level, this is a team. And then you can set a project for each of these. And then you have tasks. And then you can even break it into subtasks and smaller steps to stay on track. So when I set up Asana, I have an admin team, I have a fundraising team, I have a program team when I'm working with my clients to put this together, right? And then within the admin team, there's this project number 1, project number 2, and then all of our tasks and subtasks are contained within that space. But that's a really effective way to take something from those big goals and break it down, right? And then you can see across everything you're trying to do. How is this helping people? Is this useful? Is this a different way to think about things? Yay, Heather, I'm so glad. Yay. All right. Awesome. Getting good feedback in the chat. All right. So the next thing I like to do is what I call time boxing. I don't call it time boxing. I didn't create time boxing. Somebody else did, but time boxing, even if you're not 100% sure you have goals, time boxing is a really helpful tool. And it basically, we're taking the idea of what does your ideal week look like? What in the course of a week do you have to do? And so how much time do you need to do those things? One of the things I tell my clients all the time is there are free time trackers out there. I use Toggle Track, and you can set it up. You can just say, come up with your broad categories, right? Admin, fundraising, program, whatever, and track your time really, really relentlessly and faithfully for like 1 to 2 weeks that are going to be fairly normal weeks. You know, you're not going to get crazy off track because there's no special event or anything like that. But for 1 or 2 weeks, time track as faithfully as possible. I know it's hard because I struggle with this myself. I give this advice, and then when I try and time track, I forget what I'm doing. But what we want to do is time track for a couple weeks and find out, okay, how many hours a week do I spend on fundraising? How many hours a week do I spend on marketing? How many hours a week do I spend on programming? Then you can time box your week accordingly. And there are 2 ways that I teach my clients to do this. One of my favorite ways to do this is with themed days. And this is something that worked for me a lot when I was a marketing and fundraising director. Was I had Marketing Monday, which is when I did a lot of my deep work on marketing. And I had Fundraising Friday, where I did all of my deep work on fundraising. I did that on Friday. If you're subscribed to my newsletter, it's called Fridays Are for Fundraising. So that is that I really try and push that on people is if you're wearing a million hats, leave Friday for fundraising. It's a great way to end the week. And then having other ways of theming, you can theme your days according to what's going on during those days. So that's one way to do it, is theming your days. And so you're trying to just focus on those things on those days. Or what I have found over time has worked better for me, when I left my job as a marketing and fundraising director and started from scratch fundraising, now that I'm the CEO and I'm the chief everything officer, I have to let my days flow significantly more than I did before. And so time boxing and assigning, okay, I need this many hours for fundraising and this many hours for marketing and this many hours for whatever that you're doing. And you can spread it out across the week, right? Heather, in terms of time tracking, what happens if you get distracted by all the other things? Yeah, I mean, I don't struggle with that. My friend does too, so I'll answer that. Um, but one of the, I mean, if you can go back and just, like I said, just do it for 1 or 2 weeks where you can really think about it. One of the things I honestly did when I was doing this, so that I could time box, was I would put Post-it notes all over, and it was like, "Did you stop the timer?" So anywhere I could go in my office where I might have stepped away, like my office door, did you stop the timer? Hey, before you run to the bathroom, did you stop the timer? On my water bottle, did you stop the timer? And so that's one way you can do it. Like I said, you're not doing it forever. You're just doing it for a couple of weeks just to see how you use your time. Um, and so that's one way to do this. So that's one way to do it. Also, just kind of when I am doing the time tracking, the other thing I try to do is just pay attention to what time it is more frequently. There is a setting on Macs, and I'm sure there is one on PCs too, that you can have your device announce the hour or the quarter hour or the half hour or whatever. And so that keeps me on top of what time it is when I'm doing that time boxing or that time tracking for a little bit. But yeah, so you time track for a couple weeks and then you see, how does your time pan out? I think you'll be surprised by how it pans out. And then making deliberate times when you do certain things is really helpful. So that's the idea of time boxing, is you create pockets of time. And one of the main things I tell people is have a time for meetings. And don't meet with people outside those times for meetings unless you absolutely, absolutely can't avoid it. Because the thing that will kill your time boxing and your ability to get things done is to take meetings anytime, anywhere, any place in your schedule, right? If you work with a team, having those specific times set as well as a team can be really, really powerful too. Or just having one place that I worked, we had Wednesday was the day everybody had to be in the office and everybody had to be available for meetings all day. And the rest of the week was kind of up to us if we wanted to take meetings or not that day, which I thought was a really, really helpful thing for everybody's productivity. Was we could work in the office, we could work at home any day but Wednesday. On Wednesday, we all had to be in the office and we were all in meetings, and that's when we would schedule our meetings, which I thought lent itself well to a very productive workplace culture to respect everybody's time that way. If time boxing feels like something you can't do, the other idea is time blocking. So time blocking is this idea of taking your to-do list and turning it into calendar appointments, which means you kind of have to have a sense of how long things will take you. There's a cool tool out there. Again, I'm speaking as somebody who's neurodivergent. There's a very cool tool out there for called Goblin Tools, that was developed for people who are neurodivergent to help give time estimates on how long things will take, because those of us with ADHD brains really struggle with that. But it's a really helpful tool if you're going to say, like, I need to write a letter. How long is that going to take? How long does that take the average person, right? And then you block that time off on your calendar. And I love doing this because and I tend to create things in 30-minute increments. And then I can, when let's say something came up, I had to go put out a fire, I was supposed to do this thing in that hour or in that 30 minutes, I can drag it somewhere else in my calendar. And I always make sure that I have a couple hours in my calendar of dead space, usually on Thursday or Friday, so that anything that needs to flow can flow back into the week. Does that make sense to folks? So that's another technique. It's called time blocking. But these are both awesome tools. There are so many people who blog about this and have different ways of managing this. So I'm giving you the terms time boxing and time blocking, but you can go out there. There are so many people who think about this in so many interesting ways. So just Google either of these if they sound resonant to you. And there are so many resources out there. And I saw a question in the chat. Alice says, agree with meetings, kill productivity. How do you do this when as a fundraiser, you need to be meeting with prospects and donors frequently? Okay, Alice, let me tell you, when I do meetings with donors, I do a monthly rotation of meeting with donors. So the first week of the month, I invite them to meetings for the third week of the month. The second week of the month, I try to follow up on any emails, get them scheduled. The third week of the month, I basically live at a coffee shop and meet all my donors. And then the fourth week of the month, I do any follow-up I need to do. And then I do that rotation every single month so that there's only 1 week of the month that I'm living for donor meetings. So that's actually what I did to be really, really productive as a development director. Let's see, can you share the difference between time boxing? Okay. Jane, the difference between time box, a lot of people use them interchangeably. The main difference I've seen is time boxing is more, this is my ideal week, and every Monday from 3 to 5, I will do marketing, versus time blocking is I have these tasks to do. I will put them on my calendar at these specific times. So I find some people do better with one or the other, right? Time boxing, Monday 3 to 5, I'm absolutely nothing other than marketing. Other times, time blocking, you know what? I don't always have 2 hours worth of marketing work to do. So I'm just going to do, I'm going to put get out monthly newsletter from 3 to 5 on Monday, but that has nothing to do with the fact that that's my marketing hour, right? Is that helpful, Jane? Yeah. Yes, if you're doing a repetitive task or just like I said, I used to, as a marketing and fundraising director, I had marketing Mondays and fundraising Fridays where I did nothing else but those things. So I wasn't doing fundraising on Monday. I wasn't doing any marketing stuff on Friday. But that's one way that some brains can handle that. Other people, I've worked with other people who are like, there's no way I can possibly spend a whole day just doing fundraising tasks. I need my week to flow a little bit more. No 2 weeks look the same. Those are the people that time blocking is going to work better for. Awesome. Any other questions on that before I move to the next section? Sweet. Okay. So management and efficiency tools. So I saw in the chat, people were suggesting things. Please continue to suggest things. These are just the things I have used and I like. But if you have anything you want to suggest to folks, please do. Like I said, one of the tools I like using for time tracking is called Toggle. It's TOGGL. It is not by any means the only one out there. It is free. If you don't want to do too much stuff, most of the stuff behind their paywall is like billing related. So most nonprofits aren't going to need that. I love Toggle. I know there are tons of other options out there. So for time tracking, Toggle is my favorite. What I tend to say about these tools is there are lots of tools that do the same thing. The thing you need to do is find the one that works for your brain. I will tell you a little story for project management software. I have long loved Asana. I think when Asana first came out, I found out about it. I have loved it from the very beginning. Over time, I have heard wonderful things about Trello, and I tried Trello, and Trello sucked for me. But I know people who swear by Trello. I last year decided to try ClickUp because I had heard so many wonderful things about ClickUp. I spent 3 months trying to figure out ClickUp, couldn't figure it out, went running back to Asana. Right? I'm recently hearing a lot of people who use Monday.com. I have a client who absolutely loves it. He showed me the back end. It didn't make any sense to my brain. So all of these tools, Asana, ClickUp, Trello, Mondays, they all do more or less the same thing. They are project management software that allow you to take your work streams, break it down into projects, tasks, subtasks, all of that, keep you on top of deadlines, timeline things, put things on calendars. All of them do more or less the same thing. The difference is how they lay it out. And so, yeah, Notion is another one. Um, play with different ones. If you try Asana and you're like, this doesn't make any sense to me, that doesn't mean project management software won't work for you. It just means Asana is not the right one for your brain and the way that you think about things. Okay. I know people who love ClickUp and hate Asana. I love Asana and couldn't figure out ClickUp. It all just depends on what works for you and your brain. So yes, so that, but I do really recommend project management software, and I really recommend doing your big picture visioning and then making sure when you're breaking it down into tasks, subtasks, make sure all of that is captured in your project management software. Because it really does make a difference on keeping you on track day to day. And I'll talk about why that's so key a little bit later. Another thing, if you're not using Google Drive or something similar, then one, you need to have that. Having stuff stored in the cloud as much as possible, I think, is really critical. One of the things I've seen happen is, an organization, somebody had stuff all over a laptop and they spilled stuff on the laptop and the laptop is dead and now all the organization's files are gone, right? I think that's happening less and less these days, but I still run into people who don't use like Google Drive or Microsoft Teams or something like that, right? The thing I like to do in my Google Drive, if you look in my Asana and then you look in my Google Drive, my folders in Google Drive are organized according to the teams and projects in my Asana. So everything in each work stream is organized in the same way in both places, so that I don't have admin in one place and then finances as the head folder in the other. I have in both places admin, and within admin, there's finances, employees, HR, that kind of stuff, right? And they match in both places. So that's something I highly recommend. It's really worth taking the time to match it up. Those also all correspond to the folders in my email inbox. So it all looks the same. And I store everything in the same folders in all of those different places. And then if you're not using Calendly or calendar scheduling, I like Calendly. Again, there are other tools, but Calendly is my favorite. If you are not using a calendar scheduling thing for setting meetings, I highly recommend you give Calendly a try, especially as more and more millennials are coming in as donors. I'm seeing more and more of my clients using Calendly even to book donor meetings, which 5 years ago I would never have suggested you do, because older folks were really caught aback, taken aback by that idea. But now I think more and more donors are used to scheduling meetings, and it really cuts back on the back and forth and all of that. I'm seeing this really work well for my clients when they're working with kind of like the 50 and under crowd for donors to get stuff scheduled. I am at a point that honestly, if you ask me if we can meet and don't send me a calendar link, it's never going to happen because I'm going to forget. So I really like Calendly as a tool. And then one of the coolest tools that I like using is called Zapier. I don't know if anybody's heard of Zapier, but essentially a lot of tools integrate into one another. But if they don't, Zapier can force them to interact, which is very cool. So if you sign up for a workshop with me, you'll get an email from me. That is all something that I did in Zapier. And so you can integrate all kinds of things to go back and forth and talk to each other. And so I love Zapier. If you ever go, oh, I wish this worked with this, Zapier can probably do that for you. And so it cuts down on a ton of stuff that I used to do manually. Doodle, yeah, Doodle also schedules meetings. Yeah. Awesome. Any questions on tools? And feel free to drop any other tools that you use that help you be more productive. These are just my favorites. Awesome. All right. I'm going to take a drink of water and give you another chance to drop questions in there. Yeah. So two tools that Zapier integrates. So I, for RSVPs for events and workshops that I host at From Scratch Fundraising, I will set up a Google form. And then usually Google Forms, when you submit something, doesn't really do anything. There's no automated like, thanks for filling out my form that you can send through Google Forms. So I use Zapier to integrate it into my Gmail. And so when you fill out an RSVP for a workshop with me, you'll get an email from my Gmail that says, hey, thanks for registering. Here's the Zoom link, because I can't do that in Google Forms. Another example, one of my clients is using Neon CRM, which is one that I use a lot. And they wanted to use I can't remember if it was an auction software. We were doing 2 or 3 things. We needed to integrate 2 or 3 different online fundraising platforms and whatnot. And we didn't want to have to like pull it and upload it. And so we just used Zapier to plug all of them together. So that's another example. Yeah, they're all, the sky's the limit. The sky's the limit with Zapier. Go to their website. They have lists of everything you can integrate. So if they integrate into a tool, then any 2 tools that they integrate with can integrate into each other, which is really fun. All right, so here are some of my last top tips and some rules that I use for my own task list. So the first one is a little list of things. Whenever I have a task, I ask myself, I go through a checklist: automate, delegate, ditch, right? When I have a task, I ask myself, can I automate this? Is this something that I can set up for technology to do easier? That is how I ended up when I was doing Google Forms for my RSVPs. I was like every other day when I came into the office, like sending the emails with the Zoom links, right? And then I went, this is silly. This is a waste of time. I'm going to use Zapier and just automate this thing. So for every task, ask if there's a way you can automate it. If you can't automate it, can you delegate it? And I know people who are like solo executive directors, I can't possibly delegate this. That's why we're nonprofits and people like to volunteer with us, right? Is there a volunteer you can delegate it to? Is there a board member who could help you out, right? Especially as nonprofit leaders, there are so many critical things we need to do to run our nonprofit. If it's not critical, is there a way we can get somebody else to do it for us, right? I also see more and more nonprofit executive directors using virtual assistant services. There are more and more VA nonprofit specialized VAs popping up that you can hire somebody for a fairly reasonable amount who know how to put donation checks in your database or whatever, because they're specialized in nonprofits. So sometimes if you don't feel like you can hire somebody on staff, there's also these virtual VA programs that are popping up a lot. I do have a recommendation if there's somebody you're looking for. So automate, delegate, and then ditch anything that doesn't have to happen. When you're feeling really, really overwhelmed, ditch anything that doesn't have to happen. And then you do what remains, right? So I like to run through these steps a lot when I'm working with nonprofit leaders. Okay, everybody wants my virtual assistant person. Let's see. I'm gonna have to find her on LinkedIn. I forgot her name real quick. I'll do that if I have a few seconds at the end. If not, I'll share my email address, and you can email me and let me know that you want her contact information. Um, who here knows Franklin Covey, Seven Habits for Highly Effective People? Does anybody know? Okay, so one of the things that Franklin Covey talks about is this importance and urgency quadrant. So we have all of our tasks can be put along each of these continuums: importance and not urgent and urgent, right? And so one of the things I like to do every once in a while when I'm feeling really super overwhelmed is I like to make a little quadrant and look at my task list and try to remind myself where things fit. Um, and I have my own names for these quadrants. The not urgent, not important quadrant I call the why quadrant. Why am I doing this? I should really be thinking about not doing this, right? Yes, also called the Eisenhower quadrants. Yes. Not urgent, not important. I call the why am I doing this quadrant, because it's probably something that I could automate, delegate, or delete, right? When you are doing things in the urgent, important zone, and especially if you feel like most of your tasks fall into the urgent, important zone, you are in crisis mode. You cannot do good work when you are in crisis mode. Okay. So if you feel like all day, every day, all of my tasks are in this urgent, important zone, you're not getting your head above water, right? Something's got to give at this point, right? We've got to really re-examine our goals and our priorities at this point. The urgent, not important is what I call the email and social media zone. We spend a lot of time sending emails and posting things to social media thinking we're doing our work, right? When we are not doing our work, we are not doing the most important things, right? We spend a lot of time on social media and email doing this kind of stuff. So I would caution you. One of the things my personal practice is I have 2 30-minute blocks in my day where I open my email and check it, and otherwise I keep it closed, because I know I will spend all day in my email if I leave it open. And turn off your email notifications unless there is some fire that will come to you via your email. If something's on fire, people aren't going to email you, right? So turn off your email notifications, because if something's on fire, somebody's going to call you, right? But otherwise, you're going to get pulled back into your email over and over and over again, and there's nothing that can't wait for an hour or two. One organization I worked for, we actually had rules about urgency levels and what to do. So it was kind of if something's on fire or you need an answer in 1 hour, you text or call them. Or sorry, if something's on fire, you call the person. If you need an answer in the next 1 to 2 hours, you text the person. If you need an answer in the next 24 hours, you email the person. And if you don't need an answer, if you need an answer in the next 2 to 3 days, you wait for staff meetings. So that was how we communicated as a staff. And it was really, really helpful to understand those boundaries. And I told one of my clients that, and they implemented that, and the whole staff came to a month later, they're like, that has revolutionized how we talk to each other, right? So that's a really, really helpful option. Turn off your email. What about WhatsApp? I don't use WhatsApp. I hate it. But I would say it's based on how do people communicate with you about urgent things on WhatsApp, then leave the notifications on. But if your building's on fire, nobody's going to email you about it. They're going to call you, right? So think about it that way. Where are people going to contact you? So where we want to be living our life, the magic productivity zone, is when we're doing the things that are not urgent but important, right? So that is where I think it's really helpful when I feel really overwhelmed. I try to figure out where things fit in these zones and really trying to delegate the stuff in the why zone, limit my ability or my wanting to get into email and social media. What do I need to do to get out of crisis mode? And what do I need to do to get into this magic productivity zone? Then my last little tip is SOPs and checklists. These are two that I have just at home to make my home life better. If you can make your home life better with a cleaning planner or a morning and evening routine, do that because it's going to make your work life better, right? So I have SOPs and checklists for my home life and my work life. But if it's something you do all the time, alleviate your brain burden and make a checklist, right? I love telling a story about how I went into labor early the week before my organization's annual gala, which was a 500-person gala with members of Congress. And I went into labor 3 days before it. But I had made so many checklists and we had SOPs from the 4 prior years that I had run the organization that I called my executive director and I said, I'm in labor. And she said, great, good luck, bye. That was the conversation. Because she knew exactly where everything was and what I needed, right? Or what they needed. I had already provided it to them. So the more you take repetitive tasks and make checklists and things, again, I'm a neurodivergent parent, parenting a neurodivergent kiddo. You should see the checklists in our house. Everything, there are checklists everywhere. How do you pack your lunch? How do you pack your backpack? What do you do? How do you get ready for bed? All of that kind of stuff. We have checklists all over the house because it's easier for her and I to get through the day when we're not constantly thinking about, oh gosh, what's next? What's the next thing I've got to do, right? It helps me in my evening routine to pick out clothes for the next day or whatever, right? Make sure my backpack is packed the night before, then frantically run around the house. Where's my laptop? And first thing in the morning, right? So those types of things can really make a big difference in your work life and your home life. All right. I know we're almost at time. Jenna, can I do like 2 more minutes?
Absolutely. Take all the time you want.
Awesome. So then the last thing I do is I do a daily assessment. Because like I said, if you're heading out to cross the ocean and you're just like a couple degrees off of your destination, it doesn't matter in the first day or two of travel, but by the time you get across the ocean, right? I'm talking about when we were talking about explorers with their sails and everything. By 3 months on the ocean, you're going to land in absolutely the wrong spot, right? So I like to do kind of a daily reflection on what went well today and how do I make what went well happen more consistently. And then what went poorly today, what of that was in my control and how do I prevent it from happening again? Right? And sometimes I don't have easy answers to these. Sometimes I have to do some reading or some Googling or whatever. But a lot of the tips and techniques that I have presented to you today are things I have discovered by doing this daily assessment. So I find it really, really helpful. Even it doesn't have to be a formal thing. You don't have to have a journal where you record it all. Just having a minute of being like, wow, today was really nuts. What went wrong? And how does that never happen again? Right? Doing that on a consistent basis can really make a big difference. But at the end of the day, I have this posted in a giant poster next to my bed, and I read it every night before I go to bed. And so I'm going to read it to you real quick. Finish each day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. You shall begin it serenely and with too high a spirit to be encumbered by your old nonsense. That is a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that I absolutely love. I read it every night before I go to bed. Everybody who works in the nonprofit sector, we care so deeply and so passionately about the work that we do. I think we tend to hold on to things. And that's part of why we have such a high burnout rate in this sector, is because we care so much. We're so passionate. We always want to be better and do better. And I encourage you to be more productive, and I encourage you to do that daily assessment. But at the end of the day, you got to let it go and live the next day fresh and try not to carry too much of what happened the day before on with you. So I hope this is helpful and resonates with folks. I did mention a few times today that I have a group coaching program. It's called Sustain and Thrive. It is a pay-as-you-grow program that starts at $25 a month if your budget is under $100,000. And so if you are interested in joining Sustain and Thrive, we onboard people all the time. If you apply in the next week, we can onboard you by September. It is a full self-paced learning course. We have weekly group coaching calls. Like I said, this is this presentation in particular is in that self-paced learning course. We do weekly group coaching sessions. Amy, who you didn't get to meet today, is our accountability person. She helps you set your goals, and she will hold you accountable to those goals. And then I am available to you through our weekly coaching sessions and a private Facebook group to ask me questions anytime you need them. So please consider applying. That QR code will take you to an info page about it. If you want to apply, you can scan that QR code. That is my email. So if you wanted the recommendation for the nonprofit VA, shoot me an email at kelly@fromscratchfundraising.com, and I will send you that person's name. If you have any other questions, let me know. But I would love to see any and all of you in our Sustain and Thrive program. Yeah, I think that's all I got, Jenna.
Amazing. Fantastic. Fantastic. Now, this has been so incredible. I think what John said about these tips not just being good for nonprofits, but for life is so true.
Thank
I
you.
especially appreciated the idea of being self-reflective at the end of the day, because I think without awareness, it's impossible to change behavior. So I think having the awareness first is going to be the catalyst for being able to actually change whatever's happening. Or
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Love that.
Awesome.
So yeah, we have plenty of, we have 5 minutes. If there's anybody who wants to, dive into any one particular aspect of Kelly's presentation or provide just general insight or feedback or anything like that.
I'd love to hear what works for other people. Go ahead.
I've been asking, after a couple of the sessions, what is the one takeaway from the session? So if anybody can think of maybe the one takeaway or the one next step they would do, as it relates.
Heather's going to try Asana. Yes. I love Asana.
I was actually a Trello person.
Oh, you're a Trello
in my previous, only because that's what the organization used.
Yes.
The whole session is a takeaway. Nice.
I love it when I hear that. Yes, I love it.
I think Denise had that question.
Denise had the question, can more than one of us from our organization attend Sustain and Thrive? Here's what I usually say to that question. If you have a compelling reason why 2 people need to attend, I will consider it. I usually say 1 because I want there to be one point person for your organization. I think 1 person should be in charge of fundraising, and part of getting good at fundraising is bringing everybody else along with you. So I like coaching 1 leader to bring everybody else along. Because if I let more than 1 person come, what I have done that before, and what ends up happening is neither of them prioritize it. Because they always assume the other one's got it. So I tend to say pick 1 point person, and then I have no problem with you sharing it with everybody else in your organization, but one of you needs to be in charge.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
The identification.
Yeah. Yes. Question.
There's identifying work streams is going to be a game changer.
Perfect.
Looks like Alan has a question.
Yeah. Talk more about working in sync with neurotypical people. Okay. Yeah, Alan, I got you. Um, okay. Um, So I only got diagnosed about a year or two. So I spent most of my life being like, why can't I keep up with everybody else? Or why does my brain work so different than everybody else? So I totally hear you on that. One of the things that I have found is most things that help support neurodivergent people in the workplace are supportive of everyone in the workplace. So using things like Asana, having different standards of communication. One of the things, one place I worked at, I felt like I was drinking through a fire hose, and people would just like pop their head in my office and like, Kelly, can you do this? And then walk off, right? And I had to finally just say, no, unless it's in writing, assume I didn't hear you. Assume I don't know what you asked me to do. Because now I know my neurodivergent brain just went and it's out, right? My ADHD, if I was in hyperfocus, somebody could walk into my room and I wouldn't even notice. Um, my husband has done this before, and like magically, coffee is in front of me, and I go, "How did this get here?" It's amazing. But that's a problem that I knew I had before I even had my diagnosis. And so I did. I set a standard. I went to my director and I said, people cannot be doing this. And I can't be the only one struggling with this, right? And so we started having a new policy that it has to be in writing, it has to be in our Asana, it has to be, you cannot assume that saying something to someone means that they registered, right? So that's what I would tell you, Alan, is literally anything that's going to support your neurodivergent brain is going to be helpful to somebody who's neurotypical. And so just bringing it up as something that is like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I think probably more than just me is struggling with this. Can we try this? I think that's really, really helpful because I would do stuff like that before I was even diagnosed because I knew something that my brain was not working the same way that everybody else's were. I think it's my superpower, but also there are downsides, right? The upside, magic coffee appears. Downside, if you tell me something and it's not in writing, it's not in there. It's not. So yeah.
So funny.
Is
That's
there anything else?
incredible. What was the last? Can you reshare your last slide, Kelly?
Yes. Final slide. This one? Was it this one?
I think so.
Let's see.
I think that's the one, right, Adam?
Yeah.
I think so.
This is the slide you needed, Adam. Perfect.
Woohoo!
Awesome. Well,
Oh,
thanks
looks
for
like,
having me, Jenna.
yeah, Kelly, this has been so great. Thank you so much for wrapping up the day with us with just such a
Absolutely.
breath of fresh air and some new insights and very refreshing discussion and new tools to use.
Awesome.
So
Yes.
I hope everybody takes advantage of your program, and I guess some people have already connected in some way. So
Yes.
I think this is great.
Awesome. 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 Yeah.
Awesome.
And
Thank
follow
you.
me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, Kelly.
Bye.